The next key barrier is what we call unworkable beliefs. These are beliefs that sit below the OCD and tend to make it hard to challenge it, push forward, reclaim our life. So they're beliefs we might hold about our thoughts, about our feelings, about behavior, about other people, the world, risk, danger, uncertainty, that tend to keep us stuck if we invest highly in the belief and build our life around them. I think many models of therapy look at this. I think cognitive behavioral therapy has done a lot to really look at beliefs and core beliefs. I think within the OCD world, inference-based therapy does a really good job of mapping out how these sort of beliefs or the way we make inferences can impact the OCD system and other places as well. Within ACT, it's more would fit within the flexible perspective part of ACT, and also really links to this idea of workability. If I respond to my internal experiences or external world in this way, where does it take me? And is it working for me in the long run to take me towards my values and goals? And I think workability is really the key thing with beliefs, because as we'll see in a minute, our mind can always argue, debate, or at least my mind did when I was in OCD. I could never win those arguments, but I could step back, look at the workability and make a choice based on that and the life I want to live. But sometimes we have to do a bit of flexible perspective, looking at these beliefs, articulating them, drawing them out, looking at what happens if we follow them and how they work for us. And also looking, can we soften up, how black and white, how rigid they are, how fixated on one thing they are. And sometimes you have to do this because you can't get people to do exposure if they're holding, a belief that doesn't match their sensory experience, their common sense, their sense of self, or consensus reality and the way we kind of operate in the world. So, to say a bit more about these beliefs, so they tend to not fit well with what we understand about human brains, psychology, human nature, and relationships. They will excessively predict risk, and that doesn't fit with known probabilities. So it's over predicting risk compared with what the consensus is on probability. It's focusing on possibility rather than probability. It fixates on one perspective without taking in other views. So it's very biased, very, one angle only. And it tends to be things we could never have 100% certainty over, or at least until the day we die, the moment we die, we won't know. I often like the example here of like, how do I know I'm not a farmer? Maybe I'd be a very good farmer. I've been on farms, I enjoy them. I can imagine the hard work and labor and purpose would be good. How do I know I'm not a farmer? Well, actually, I can't answer that question until the day I die. And obviously in that example, that's something that's, potentially ego-syntonic, i.e. I could enjoy that and it could be values-based. So don't muddle that up with an OCD thing that has aversion or doubt or distress or uncertainty around them. Just a playful example. But the point is, I would never know that. I could take up farming right in my 80s, my 90s, even as long as I'm physically able. Arguably, as long as my mind's able, I could start working on a farm in the sense of planning the system, and then I would be a farmer. So something like that, if I put my life on hold trying to figure out, am I a farmer, could I be a farmer, do I like farming, I'm going to stop the life I want to live. I'm going to really put the brakes on or make it impossible to make the choices that take me in the direction that I want to go in. And So really, a lot of these unworkable beliefs are like this. We wouldn't be able to answer them. If we dismissed our common sense and our life experience so far, which is what most people use to answer these sorts of uncertainties, I would never be able to answer it until the day I die. Sometimes they're unfalsifiable completely, like there's no way of disproving them. So it's just an uncertainty that would keep us stuck. They will pull us back into patterns of compulsion, avoidance, and pain. And if we continue to follow them, ultimately, when OCD gets more severe, they will shut down our life completely to the point of depression and hopelessness, and possibly even feeling suicidal and, at the very least, feeling very depressed. Again, not to trigger people who have OCD fears about depression and suicidality. So if that's coming up for anyone, then use your skills to fuse. And what we're talking about here more is workability, like where these beliefs will tell us they will, well, where they will take us. They will shut our life down so much that eventually we can't be the person we want to be and live the life we want to live. And they really just don't take us in our valued directions towards things we value, expressing our core values and our actions and building up goals that reflect that. So, an example like I must be absolutely certain that my family are safe before I can move on in my life. Well, it's unworkable in the sense that unfortunately in human existence, no one is certain of that. And we all deal with that risk. It might, for most people be a lower probability, but it's still a possibility. So if I put that belief in charge of my behavior and I start doing compulsions to try and solve it, I'm going to be stuck on that forever because I can't answer that again until the end of my life, my family's lives, to see what happened, what played out for them. So other examples that I like to emphasize, are things like around the power of thoughts and feelings. So intense feelings mean something. They're always meaningful. Repetitive thoughts are important because I have a thought, it's the same as the action. Urges and impulses are always important. Intense images are important. I can't resist compulsions. I can't push back. I can't let go of mental compulsions. Sensations are the same as the thing I'm afraid of. So health anxiety sensations are the same as illness. Contamination sensations are the same as actually being contaminated. I can feel the contamination. In more the taboo themes, physical sensations are the same as egosyntonic arousal. And I need to know for certain on this. Things like I should be calm and enjoying my life and not have all this difficulty in my head. I have to take action on this impulse to do compulsions. Not doing anything about this thought is as bad as actually hurting someone or doing it. I can't stand these feelings and thoughts. I can't handle them. And other people are not having bizarre thoughts like me. So really, these just a handful of examples. There are many, many, ways that these beliefs can show up. And what we want to do is really identify what beliefs might be tripping us up in our OCD recovery work, try to identify them and try to see how they are unworkable, how they keep us in the compulsions, how believing this thing means it's inevitable. I'm going to start doing compulsions again. And so we really want to identify those, and then we're going to move into testing the workability and other steps from there. Now, the belief work, we don't want to be doing it during OCD episodes, during more intense times. We probably most likely want to do this with a therapist and work this through. In the moment, there's always a risk that this becomes more rumination and analysis and worry and checking and mental compulsions, self-reassurance. We could be using all this stuff to try and reassure ourselves. And we don't want to be doing that in the moment. But sometimes we have to do this work to get a path to exposure work, because without challenging and becoming more flexible with these beliefs, they're just blocking the way, and we're going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out with exposure work. So we want to clarify this. As I said, in CBT, we'll have good methods. Inference-based therapy has good methods for this. You want to be working with someone who understands the power of belief in the OCD system. And once we've got these beliefs sort of identified, then we're kind of going, well, what would happen throughout my life if I hold this belief? If I hold the belief that intense feelings are always meaningful, okay, as soon as I have intense feelings, I'm going to start trying to avoid, get away, respond to them with mental compulsions, analyze them, monitor them, threat monitor them to see, what's happening. And that's going to keep me stuck. And actually, it doesn't agree with our experience in our life. Workability is so much about looking at our experience that we've had in our life rather than worrying about the future, looking backwards and making sense of what we actually have experienced. And all of us have had intense feelings that we haven't listened to, and then we've gone and done something challenging. Examples I often use is, passing your driving test, competing in sports, job interviews, going on dates, all these sorts of things. You'll have felt most likely intense feelings and thoughts telling you not to do it and to avoid, and yet you did it. And often it's really good. I mean, for this one with thoughts and feelings, I often say, my mind before I go to a social event or party is often saying, oh, you can't be bothered, Johnny, there's no point, it won't be fun, or it's going to be too difficult, too challenging, so it might have a more tired, shut down quality, or might be a more anxious quality. And I diffuse those thoughts and I go, and so often my mind is wrong, and it can't fortune tell the future, doesn't have a crystal ball. And our minds really can't. They're trying to do that because they're trying to solve uncertainty to keep us safe and make predictions and figure out the future. But a lot of the time, our minds really can't do that. And maybe we can do that a little bit more in the present moment with things we can actually see and move around and, change. But as we go more into the future, it gets even less able to do that. So, really we want to identify these beliefs, see what would happen if we lived by them, see how they're unworkable, and then use that as motivation to help us start to do our exposure work. Because the way we either change beliefs or loosen the grip of them, make them less impactful, or reduce them doing the extrapolation, so that you have one belief and then it goes, and I couldn't do that, and this couldn't and this couldn't happen because of that. So, the way we either change a belief completely or be able to stand back and act no matter what the belief's saying, or stop the belief from going and it means this to the end of the world, is through action. It's through diffusing an action. And we can use a flexible perspective, see it from different angles, try to identify why it doesn't either match consensus reality, our sense of self, common sense, science, other things like that. But then that's never going to overcome OCD. That's only building up motivation to face something. And then, we can have a compassionate response as well. We can bring a compassionate perspective to, this belief that's really gripping us and holding us tightly, and how painful that is, how difficult that is. But ultimately, diffusing and taking action is the way we will change that response. When I got in a car, I initially had the belief, this is so complicated, I'm not going to be able to do this, so difficult. And the only way I got through that belief is through a lot of driving to the point where you're driving down, the motorway, and you listen to music and you're taking a sip of coffee, and you might be having a conversation with someone at the same time and focusing on the road and driving. So really, action is the way we change beliefs. Sometimes we can't change a belief completely, but we can lessen the power. Something like BDD, body dysmorphia disorder, body dysmorphic disorder. The belief might be very strong that I don't like the way I look and I don't like this feature. And sometimes actually recovery is not debating that or arguing that. It's getting the distance from that so that we can still live our life and accept that, okay, I don't like that part of me, but I'm not going to put my life on hold for that. And that, again, that's through looking at the workability, looking at the way our mind's extrapolating, because I don't like part of my image, it means I'll never be successful. I won't have the life I want. I won't meet anyone. Nothing good will happen for me. To, I don't like this feature and I can live with it and I can move forward in my life and do the things that matter and take control of that future direction rather than put it on hold because of a belief. And, there are other things in OCD, sometimes with things like contamination, people will always be on the cautious side of the spectrum with that. There's a whole range of human behavior where some people, don't have OCD, but are more conscious of decontaminating and that kind of thing. And then you have other people on the other end of the spectrum that are very carefree and don't think about that stuff. And maybe will always be, in recovery on the more cautious side. So we'll hold the belief that it is important to, focus on cleanliness and avoid the risk of certain contaminants. At the same time, it's overshooting that. The belief is overshooting that so far that it's shutting down our life. And, at the worst case scenario means we can't really go and do anything or touch anything or meet anyone or do anything like that. So that's all to say that sometimes beliefs will still be there, but they're just less powerful, less extreme, and they don't do the chaining of, because of that, I can't do that. Because of that, I could never do that. And because of that, I have to stay in my house and not do anything. The way those kind of beliefs can change to just I don't like the feeling of disgust, but I have to live with it at times, and I'm going to not let it control my life. So, really working through workability, trying to build up that, that belief that if I follow OCD, it will shut down my life to a point where I don't want to, it's not the life I want to live. And that could really be much more dangerous than the thing that OCD is scaring us in, much more likely to develop depression and feel really stuck and in a lot of pain than the minuscule risk of whatever the OCD is telling us. So, and it can feel quite painful to look at workability and look at what it's doing. We don't want that to trigger resentment and rumination about everything OCD is taken away and how hard life is and depressive rumination there. So we need to make sure we diffuse all of that. But we do need to take an honest look at what this will do for our life if we keep following it. And if we don't like that direction, then okay, let's make a change, even if it feels frightening or scary. And how can we gradually make that change, gradually challenge it to begin with, build up our skills so that it's less intimidating to face it, our skills in diffusion, acceptance, urge surfing, present moment attention, and letting go of compulsions. And it will be easier to face it. It won't be easy, but my experience is it is easier to face it with those skills stronger and in place. And then, what's a more workable future that we want to go towards? A workable one with the feelings example is intense feelings are a bit of information. I can choose whether I listen to them or not. And I'm going to pursue my life no matter what my feelings are doing. So really looking at workability of, so really looking at the workability of the belief, the direction we want to go, and using that to help us challenge these beliefs that keep us stuck. Another thing is we don't want to get into too much debate. If we can't get a flexible perspective on the belief, if we can't tap into how other people would feel about this or our common sense, our experience in life to date, what our history tells us, if we can't use that to build up enough motivation, then I wouldn't be debating with your mind. That's where we want to move more into diffusion and look at workability, because workability is the ultimate trump card. Okay, OCD might put a convincing argument forward, but if I follow it, it's going to shut my life down. You can't debate that, and your experience will tell you that. And so, okay, let's look for something more workable and be courageous here, because we got one shot at this life as far as we know, and let's make it count. Let's live it.